And it's probably more comfortable because of
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back from lunch. Everybody enjoy their lunch, right? Let's have a hand for our sponsors, our sponsor for the lunch. More evidence of why we want to come back to the Napa Valley. This is just a typical day in the Napa Valley with sunshine, warm weather, olive trees. That's coming tonight. We're measuring your wine. We have some notes on you from last night, and so before we start our session this afternoon, I want to make just a couple of mentions of our upcoming programs. In my opening remarks, I mentioned this year will be our 20th anniversary of the Worlds of Flavor International Conference and Festival, which we've historically held at the Greystone campus. We take over the entire campus. If you've never been, it's pretty wild. Someone described it as a 9-ring circus in terms of typically we fly in somewhere between 60 and 80 chefs from all over the world, in addition to the United States. And we'll do the same thing this year for our 20th anniversary edition. The theme is Legends of Flavor, in the sense of sort of big personalities and big talent that we're all curious about or that we've been following from around the world, as well as those cuisines that we're presently all really engaged in and want to learn more about from the Mediterranean, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. So that program is coming up April 18th to the 20th. For attendees of this conference, we're offering a 15% discount. So there's your code if you want to sign up for that program. Send your staff, your teams, your colleagues. And then in June of next year will be our 6th annual Menus of Change conference that we do in collaboration with the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, looking at the future of food from the point of the integration of optimal nutrition, sustainability, food ethics, changing business models with a 5 to 50 year time horizon. It's a good time to catch up on the current science, whether related to nutrition research or climate research, or pick your natural resource or human nutrition issue. And it's also very rich with case studies of people that are out making change in our industry and the various sectors that we pull into for that conference. It's also housed for those of you that haven't been on our Hyde Park campus or haven't been there recently, a couple years ago we built a gorgeous new Marriott Pavilion, which is a conference center with an 800-seat theater. Really fabulous facilities, so be sure and join us for that. And also we have a lot of free resources associated with that conference and that initiative that are online at menusofchange.org. 24 principles of healthy, sustainable menus, infographics, all kinds of things that can help you with training and menu innovation and so forth in your operations. And again, a 15% discount for folks that are attending this conference. So to get us started then this afternoon, we're speaking of the future. One of the things that we wanted to do this year was to sort of look at several futures in the sense of, not just what's right around the corner, but what's going to sort of phase in over time. And so we've named this session The Known and the Unknown, right? We don't all know what's coming up. We know pieces of it, other pieces that we don't know, mapping out the future across the next 5, 10, and 20 years. And so to lead this session, it's my great pleasure to introduce Will Rosenzweig, who I think is known to many or most of you. Will's an internationally recognized entrepreneur and educator who serves as a senior advisor to Generation Investment Management, public and private, a public and growth equity practice chaired by Al Gore. He was the founding CEO of the Republic of Tea and has been involved in over 40 purposeful ventures, including Adwala, Leapfrog, and Revolution Foods. He's been a big part of the faculty at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley for many, many years, where he's a social impact fellow and taught the first MBA courses in social entrepreneurship and social venture development. In 2010, Will was honored with the Oslo Business for Peace Award, which represents the highest distinction given to a business person for outstanding accomplishment in the area of ethical business. He was also the founding dean of our CIA Food Business School, and we are very grateful for his leadership in launching this important new initiative for our college. And finally, you probably all saw that issue, I think it was last year, of Bon Appetit magazine, in which Will was named one of 7 people shaping the future of food. Please welcome Will Rosenzweig.
So you wish your parents were around when that stuff gets read. It's great to be here. I just arrived this morning, and as you listen to the buzz around the campus here, I heard one name repeated over and over: Eve Thoreau. Did you hear Eve? She was awesome. So big hand for Eve. She's doing great work. I'm the self-appointed president of her fan club, so I think she is kind of leading the way. I just wanted to kind of invoke her in this session because I think her view of what she spoke about yesterday and what she's writing about needs to become part of the dialogue here. So many of you know I've turned a lot of my entrepreneurial energy recently to trying to figure out how to prepare and teach people about food systems. And last year, I actually had the opportunity, I was handed the talking stick or the reins of a very popular course at UC Berkeley called Edible Education 101, which was started by Alice Waters and was led by Michael Pollan for many years. And as food grows in importance really around the world, and as a topic of great passionate focus for many young people, this course has now swelled to like 300 people that show up, and we're live streaming it. But I'm preparing for next January's start. I've been thinking a lot about how do you prepare people? What are the skill sets or tool sets or mindsets that are really necessary to participate responsibly in this world? So I had a couple thoughts before we bring in our distinguished speakers today. But one aspect of this edible education course will be about helping young people become systems thinkers. So imagine becoming a systems thinker on food systems. That's really a core competency that I think everyone needs to develop. And honestly, that's very different than the way, say, the business world or even somewhat the science world has kind of been conventionally trained, which is much more linear and strategic. And systems are really all about interdependencies. And then the other aspect of the course for edible education that I'm thinking a lot about is how do we teach ethics? Because food really is an ethical act. Eating is an ethical act. And much of it is opaque to us, and we're hearing a lot about the coming wave of transparency. So if you could imagine becoming an ethical systems thinker or doer, that's kind of the aspiration that I would like to, share today. I also want to put out a challenge, and this is goes in the category of pet peeves. Those of you that some of my students from Berkeley are here, they know one of my real pet peeves is never write me an email that says you'd like to pick my brain. Another one of my pet peeves is the term consumer. How many times have we heard the word consumer in the last 24 hours? A lot. I'm gonna poke my friends at IDEO about this because you guys actually have the power to change this. So if industry, if business, if people who sell stuff and make stuff and sell stuff, think of the people who buy it as consumers, especially in food, we will never get to a world that is healthy and sustainable and equitable because it becomes kind of a mindless paradigm. Consuming just leads to, well, it seems to lead to the kind of broken food system that we have and the broken health system that we have and really the kind of rampant preventable disease that we have. And I'm just wondering if we could actually bring about a systems change and leadership, maybe from this group of thinking about systems ethics, and bring in the new language that shifts industry from calling people who eat consumers. So I would challenge you, if you have any good ideas about what replacement words might be, that we should volunteer them on Slido. I've received 2 so far. One was sustainers. Not crazy about that one. But think about, instead of consumers, how about just eaters? People who are eaters. It's just an idea. Anyway, the last session was so great. We heard so much about how fast things are changing, and it made me think about this magazine cover. Chad, can you show this? This is almost 10 years ago to the day. Anybody here have a Nokia cell phone on them? Anybody using one? Nobody. 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? Imagine. So that's just sort of a preamble to maybe how predictably irrational the markets are. And don't forget, 10 years ago, this is before social media. This is before the ubiquity of the cell phone, the globalization of the cell phone, the speed of news, fake news, and otherwise traveling around the world. So this session is really about helping you, our participants, learn from some people that are charged with predicting the future and making big decisions, big bets, small bets, course corrections, new investments in how to move forward. So the other thing about the going back to sort of learning is I think that we've got to get more cross-disciplinary in our educational kind of orientation. Traditionally, like places like UC Berkeley, other big universities, they're very siloed. And all of a sudden, you know, we're kind of breaking out of that mold. So I'm always encouraging the students in one school to go over to classes in the other school. The most interesting students, I think, and the ones with the highest potential that actually make a difference are the ones that have set themselves with some really good sort of domain expertise, some strong science and biology, ecology background, maybe some understanding of engineering, and of course policy and law. And then if they want to go to business school, great. But what we try to do with this panel, too, is bring you some diverse perspectives. So you'll hear from people that are focused on insight, on actually running companies, on policy, and on sort of innovation at scale. So without further ado, I'd like to get started. Our first guest is Randy Burt. He is a senior partner in the consumer practice at A.T. Kearney. He's responsible for gleaning the consumer insights that firm is famous for sharing. And prior to A.T. Kearney, he spent 5 years at Nielsen, which is the gigantic number crunching insight house that informs everything from big CPG companies to political candidates. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Randy Burt.
Thanks very much, Will. I'm very excited to be here today. Big topic, the future of food. I think it's probably one of the most exciting times to be in food that I can remember over the last 20 or so years of my career, and really excited to share some eater insights, Will. Maybe I'll switch real time. You know, just a little bit about A.T. Kearney before I get going. We're a global management consulting firm, about $1 billion, serving clients in 40 countries across the globe, 60 offices, and consumer and retail is really the core of what we do, and we really focus on strategic transformation and helping companies really face the future and transform how they go to market, how they drive supply chain capabilities to really meet the consumer where they're headed. So excited to share that today. And you know, what I'm going to share initially here is based on work we've partnered with the Wall Street Journal on over about the last year or so. And we really wanted to understand what America's 250th anniversary is coming up. It's about 10 years out in 2026. And so we imagined what America might look like in 2026. And as part of that, we said, what are consumers or eaters going to look like? I'll try to do some real-time adjustment to my nomenclature here. And what we found as we did this work was there's a fundamental shift that's happening, and we're sort of on our way to it, but it's going to continue to accelerate. And we frame that as the change from an affluence model to an influence model. The affluence model is really characterized by mass markets, by companies looking at year-over-year, quarter-over-quarter performance, looking at market share, looking at how do you drive a perception of self-worth with consumers or eaters that's based on what they buy. And that's characterized by a focus on value and price, and really making that as a core part of an offering. It's characterized by sort of a one-size-fits-all approach, and having mass production, and I think food is a great example of this, where big food has really focused on how do I produce at scale since World War II, how do I produce more efficiently, how do I get the same product into every American home, on every American table, and how do I do that in a way that is really cost efficient and is not really differentiated for different consumers. And then the last thing that characterizes the affluence model is that it's transactional, and it really focuses on the purchase versus a relationship. As we think about this shift to the influence model, and affluence, you might say, a consumer or an eater is characterizing themselves as I am what I buy. And as you move to the influence model, the change that we see is more about I am what I do. And that's really how, certainly millennial-led, I would say, but a ton of upward influence to Gen X, my generation, to boomers, to the silent generation. And you're seeing this really transcend generations, although it's, I would say, millennial-led. And the shift is characterized by a focus on values. So consumers want to understand not only what the product is, but also how it was made. They want to understand what the company stands for. They're looking for much more authentic brand stories and a connection on that front that is new. It's characterized by personalization and really a need to make sure that you're serving different segments in a very different way, both in terms of experience and product. And it's based on trust. And that is really essential to building brands today, and it's essential to successfully growing businesses today. How does that manifest itself in consumer goods and food? We think food retailers, food manufacturers, food service players are really facing an historic challenge, and they're going to have to think about customers, employees, their organizations, their supply chains in fundamentally different ways. Big food, top 25 food manufacturers in the U.S. have lost 300 basis points of market share to small and medium-sized manufacturers over the last 3 or 4 years. So there's a huge shift there. And it's not just about rate of growth, it's about overall share of growth. So you're seeing that position that big food has built erode because they haven't been able to meet some of these new consumer demand, basically, and meet the new consumer. Organic has grown 200% since in the last 10 years, where conventional food has grown 31%. You've got sports performance products that grew 33% last year. Wellness bars grew 12%. Several other categories, you're seeing that. And that's in a market that's growing at 1% overall. So you're seeing a huge shift, and you're seeing food manufacturers that are really being impacted by this, and retailers as well. 3 things really are fundamental to where the consumer is going. It's about experience. The share of disposable income that was spent on experience-based purchases in 1985 was about 50%. Today, it's about 2/3. So that's a huge shift. And this is about how do you bring product, not a product focus, but an experience focus to what is offered to your consumers. How do you connect across different products to sort of have more of I call it a horizontal view of what a consumer is looking for versus a vertical product-centric view. Certainly experiential dining, exposure to global flavors, meeting health and wellness needs, all those things, and connecting those to lifestyle traits, all those things are becoming more and more important. The second thing that we see as essential is convenience. Snackification and the shift from 3 meals a day to 4 or 5 or more meals a day has been something that is happening now, and we think will continue to accelerate. And this is really about meeting the consumer where she wants to be met, how she wants to be met, when she wants to be met. And it's not about one solution. It's about having a flexible capability to meet that need and make sure that what you're doing is convenient for the consumer. And that used to be about location when you think about retail, and location is still a part of it, but it's just one piece of it now. And all the things around home delivery, order online, pick up in store, creating opportunities to make it easy for the consumer or the eater to engage with your product is essential. The last one is what we call the conscious consumer, and I'd say this is probably the most fundamental shift that we're seeing. I'm just going to look at a couple of stats. There is a huge erosion in trust that we've seen, and we saw as part of our research in the last 5 years in large organizations and corporations. In the U.S., 5 years ago, 36% of consumers had a lack of trust in large corporations. Today, it's 55%. In the United Kingdom, that went from 35 to 57%. In France, it went from 29 to 56%, and in Germany, from 37 to 52%. So that is something that is really a huge challenge, especially for larger established players. But it's something that smaller players have been able to take advantage of because they don't have some of these legacy issues built up to overcome. Social responsibility is also becoming essential. And again, this is something that we're seeing across generations. Millennial-led, certainly, but you're seeing it everywhere. And over 70% of consumers in the work that we did actively look for brands that are doing good in the world, and they also or avoid them if they're doing something that they disagree with. So that's really becoming fundamental to the offering, and it's becoming fundamental to sort of how to engage with these consumers. So in addition to those three sort of core changes that we see that we're seeing the beginnings of, but certainly are going to accelerate, we think, over the next 5 to 10 years, price will continue to be important. And you can't ignore the value equation, but it has to be the foundation of it has to be the other things I talked about, experiential, convenient, and conscious. So we've heard a lot about millennials and Gen Z. They are the key segments of the population driving these trends, and I'll talk a little bit about just the share of growth that you can expect to see from them in the coming years. You can see behind me a forecast that we've built based on Bureau of Labor Statistics and A.T. Kearney forecasts and a number of other sources that we integrated, and about $80 billion worth of growth in the next 5 years in the U.S. food market. 108 billion of that will be from millennials and Gen Z. Well, you see erosion in the other markets, and that's just going to continue to accelerate as we move forward further out. Less certainty certainly as the further out we go, but these two cohorts are going to be essential to success. And again, I think the trends that they're driving have influence across multiple generations. The good news is that food at home and food away from home are both going to grow a lot faster than GDP, 2 or 3 times faster than most GDP forecasts. So there's a lot of opportunity for all of us in the food industry to take advantage of it. But it's really going to require, we think, 3 different things. The first is around earning trust. And we've heard a lot about transparency and how you achieve that. But it's really about first changing how you operate. People want to know not only what the product is, but how the animals, people, and environment were treated along the way in producing it. That's only going to accelerate that. And so changing practices is the first step towards that. But then making sure you're engaging with the right micro-influencers online, you're communicating transparently about what's in your product, what your health claims are, what your taste claims are, et cetera, is going to be essential. And changing how you market to be much more segmented will be essential to that. The second key area of focus that we see is around getting personal and really thinking about either a consumer of one or much smaller segments of consumers to approach and target, and figuring out offerings that can really meet them where they are and drive growth by doing that. And then the third big area we see as a key opportunity is around collaboration and M&A acquisition strategies. And collaboration is going to change fundamentally, and you're starting to see that. But to be able to serve a consumer that wants an experience, you have to shift from a product focus, and you have to really understand how do you partner CPG to CPG. How do you partner with a retailer, let's say, for a health and wellness offering that integrates lifestyle changes like exercise and sleep with things like food, with things like medicine and conventional what a pharmacy would conventionally bring. And so those kind of collaborations are going to be essential to winning the future. And we think acquisition strategy really, while we see continued consolidation certainly, acquisition strategy has really got to be focused more on building new capability, bringing in organizations that understand trends and understand this new consumer and where they're going, versus what we've seen much more of a focus on driving scale and building cost efficiency. So those are sort of what we're seeing in terms of where the consumer is going, what we think large food manufacturers and retailers should do about it, and look forward to the panel discussion. I'm going to hand it off to Mark Alexander now.
Hey, a special round of applause for Randy for that quick substitution and adoption of my proposal. So well done. I think you had 17 eaters in there, so well done. It's interesting, this word value. I mean, the aspiration of having a conscious eater is a wonderful vision. We're coming into an era now where there are actually different, varied mental models of what value means. And our next speaker is a part of the senior leadership at Campbell's Soup Company, works very closely with the CEO, Denise, runs the U.S. and operations and beyond. And it's just, Campbell's has kind of put its foot forward in the industry to think progressively about its corporate social responsibility, its interdependencies in the full ecosystem of how it participates. And it's getting a lot of credit. It was the first company to actually resign from the Grocery Manufacturers Association, which is interesting. Maybe Mark can talk a little bit about that. But I contrast that with like 3G Capital. Has anybody heard of them? So they have a model, and if you go to their website, it says they believe in creating long-term value. Their model for long-term value is a very narrow definition of value. They're talking about financial value for shareholders. And so I think it's very interesting now that 3G is very actively pursuing the food industry with their model, which is effectively to take out costs, increase margins, which every business leader wants to do. But we can't tell if that's in a way that represents or takes responsibility for those interdependencies. So I thought it would be interesting to bring Mark up now and have him talk about how a company the size of Campbell's can maneuver, iterate, reshape itself, remake itself from truly the former era of food, where it's been a staple of everybody's pantry growing up, to a new kind of company for the 21st century. So please welcome Mark Alexander.
Thank you, Will, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk to you, hopefully relatively briefly, about Campbell's, who we are, about the things that we're doing right now, and then a little bit about how we're thinking about the future and the future of food and where we're going. So first of all, and I think someone at the conference, I'm informed, made a great statement about the future of food, which is the future of food is food. And it sounds pretty basic, but I actually believe that. And it really is about the food that we make and the ingredients that we use and how we prepare it and how it tastes. So we have a very core culinary capability at Campbell's Soup Company, led by Tom Griffiths, who many of you will know. He's an alum of the Culinary Institute of America. And he leads a team of 20 chefs. And we spend a lot of time on making our food taste as great as it can. And table stakes is it needs to taste better than all of our competitors' food, and we measure that all the time in each of our categories. And then we have a gold standard for every product that we make, set by the chefs, and we're constantly striving to achieve that in a commercial fashion. So that's starting with the food. But a little bit about our brands. Many of you will be familiar with our legacy brands, Campbell's Soup and Chunky Soup. Some of our newer ones, we've just launched a clean label new brand called Well Yes. And then rotating there as well as Pacific Foods. We haven't closed that deal yet, but we've announced it and we're working towards getting that one done. And then I'm just going to leave this spinning for a while, because if you stare at this slide long enough, you will just magically just walk to the supermarket and start buying Campbell's Soup. You won't know why, but it is because of this slide. We also have some other stuff. We've gone, following the tomato, buy goldfish, and followed that into Prego and V8 juice. We have Pepperidge Farm, Goldfish and Milanos and good things like that. But we've also been on a march of buying companies that are closer to where the consumer is going in terms of food. We have Plum Organics Baby Food. I just spent the last couple of days with them down in Berkeley. Great company. Matt's here from Plum. We also have Bolthouse Farms just down south of here in Bakersfield. And we hope to add Pacific up in Oregon shortly. So we're a mixture of old and new. And to be around for 150 years, which is how long we've been in existence, we've had to be an adaptive company. A few things have changed over that period of time. This is how soup was made a generation or two ago. That's one of our original labels. But our founder, we call our modern day founder, the gentleman who invented condensed soup, is a guy named John T. Dorrance. And he was a chemist. He graduated from college as a chemist. But he also then went to France, and he spent 3 or 4 years working in some of the top restaurants in Paris and learned to become a very accomplished chef. And then he fused those two capabilities and invented condensed soup. And condensed soup was really a breakthrough at the time, because when he did that, which is the turn of the last century, there was a massive amount of change happening in America. Similar today, obviously the changes were different. But you had industrialization happening, urbanization happening. People were moving from the countryside and from the farms into the cities, and they were moving further and further away from their food. And the accessibility of good, fresh, safe food was challenged. And so condensed soup was really a breakthrough in those days. And good, fresh ingredients that were put in a can, preserved through heat and a vacuum, and sold for 10 cents a can. So it was affordable and accessible to everyone in America, and that's why the company took off. That has inspired us today to think about how we want to make food and how we want to participate in the food system in America and beyond. Because as Will was saying, the health situation in this country is severely challenged. We've got obesity at epic rates, we've got type 2 diabetes, we have heart disease, we have all kinds of problems with the health system in this country. And we have a broken food system, as Will said, that is not helping matters from a health standpoint. And the top 1%, the top 10%, the top 20% of eaters in this country certainly have access to great food. They can walk down to Whole Foods and they can get terrific, healthy, organic, natural produce and great foods. But we believe that really good food, good tasting, wholesome, real food, should be accessible and available to everyone. And so our mission is really around democratizing good food and democratizing real food and making it available for everyone. And at the core of that is our purpose. And we spent a lot of time, as most companies do, figuring out what we want to do. But we spent some time a few years ago thinking about why we are doing these things. And that inspired the purpose, which we looked back at our founder, Dr. Dorrance, and thought about what he was trying to do, and thought about why we show up for work every day. And we show up for work every day to make real food that matters for life's moments. Real food meaning that we're sourcing really good, high-quality ingredients, that we're preparing them with care, that we're sourcing things ethically, that we're being transparent about what we do, and that we're making our products available and accessible to everyone. So we're making some good progress there. It is a work in many parts. Probably the biggest and most challenging part is overhauling all of our legacy products. I mean, we started in an okay place, but with a lot of work to do to really live up to our definition of what real food is. So we're partway through about a $50 million investment back into our food to remove all the other artificial colors and flavors, to remove all the BPA from the can liners, which are just about finished with, to change all of the poultry to antibiotic-free chicken meat, and a whole range of changes like that to move the food from mass-processed, efficient, safe food to all of that, plus good, identifiable ingredients and real food. We're also aiming to lead the pack in terms of transparency. Obviously, been a lot of conversation about that over the last couple of days, but we have a number of ways we're trying to be very open about the ingredients we're using and how we're making our food. We provide a lot of that on a site called what'sinmyfood.com. We're part of the SAGE project, where we're putting out more and more information about our food. We were the first major food company to commit to, which we've now done, labeling the presence of GMOs on all of our products because we believe they're safe, but we also believe that consumers have a right to know, and consumers told us they want to know, and eaters. And so we've put that onto all of our packages. Just finish off talking a bit about the future. This may be what the future looks like, may not be, but we spent a bunch of time over the last 2 years thinking about what the future could look like. And as we did that, we realized that, and the Nokia example is a great one, and you look at these and you think about how you traveled, how you consumed information and entertainment, where you stayed just a few years ago, and things have completely changed, and industries have been completely disrupted. And that's how we are feeling about the food industry right now, is even though we've been around for 149 years, that doesn't guarantee that we're going to be around for even another 10 years. And that's the level of urgency that we're feeling about changing what we're doing and thinking about where we're going. And so we look at the mega forces that are acting upon our industry and our company, and you've got the environment, and you've got huge economic changes and social changes happening, technology accelerating things at a rate of knots, and health. And we look at these giant forces that are affecting things, and we start to imagine where things are going and where things are going to end up. And we did a really interesting piece of work which continues to go. And we're actually working with Scott, who's here somewhere. Hi, Scott, from Idea Couture, who came in to help us run a process around understanding the future, envisioning different scenarios of how things could turn out. And we actually envisioned 21 different scenarios. We had 40 of our smartest people in the company working on this, came up with 21 different scenarios of where things could end up, and then collided them all together to come up with some different visions of the future, and then marched those back to what can we do today to start to move quickly against those. And we're not so much trying to predict the future as we're trying to prepare for different scenarios as they might unfold. And through all that work and colliding those things together, we identified 8 spaces where we think things are headed and where we've started to take action to create products and services and experiences that will be different for people and will address where food is really headed. And I'm going to show you a brief video now that sort of captures some of the main ones that we're working on.
People, things, and processes are connected like never before. It's reshaping our world and the way we shop, cook, and eat. Life is lived on the go. We expect everything to be available to us at any moment, in any location. Soon our needs and desires will be anticipated and delivered on seamlessly. When it comes to the home, smart kitchens and connected things are creating a new vision of how we'll live. Automatic replenishment, guided cooking, and new content experiences will transform the culinary journey. These developments are moving us to an age of increased personalization in communications, products, and services. Today, monitoring our health through digital tools is generating new insights into food and what our individual bodies need. Personalized food solutions will help us meet our specific health goals and aspirations. Snacking is about more than just getting the fuel to keep going. The snacks of tomorrow will bring about the specific cognitive, emotional, and physical states we'll need to be at our best across all of life's moments. Changing climate conditions are impacting agriculture globally. New food systems will future-proof our access to fresh, quality products. Local and regional products are popular for their freshness, small batch quality, and the sense of story. New network and supply chain strategies will aim to increase efficiency and make local at scale. As we enter a new world, we'll have to ask the right questions to find the right solutions. The future depends on our actions today.
So this process has allowed us to envision some different scenarios for the future, and we've begun, and it really forms now the core of our strategic planning process, and we're setting teams out to go and make things happen in these different areas that we've identified. So I'm just going to give you two quick examples of where that's happening. One is in future commerce, where we've invested, like many companies have, in building out a completely new division of the company that's doing digital and e-commerce work. And one of the things they're doing is developing new business models. An example of how we're moving into the meal kit space, but in a little bit of a different way, is through our strategic partnership with Chef, where we've made an equity investment and also have a set of partnership programs that we're working on. We've turned what was a passive information gathering activity into an ability to go and get your dinner right away. So we have a terrific recipe site. It's one of the better traveled recipe sites online called campbellskitchen.com. We have about 14 million views a year on that, but you go there and you get a recipe. You can print it out or get it emailed. You get various different services you can provide. We now have an option that just went live on Tuesday where we have more and more recipes coming on where you can click on the recipe and it gives you the option to fulfill that recipe, all of the ingredients and the recipe with different types of serving sizes and get it delivered to your home through Chef. So it takes what was an information site and turns it into an ability to purchase and get the food delivered. So that's an example of one of the things we're doing. Many of you are familiar with Habit, which is a venture that the Campbell Soup Company is the sole funder. Neil Grimmer, who founded Plum Organics, is now onto his next venture, which is leading a personalized nutrition company. And for those of you who don't know about Habit, the insight there is that everyone is wanting to know, what do I need to eat? You know, these Uber diets may or may not be relevant for me. I need to know what my body needs. And so through a testing protocol involving DNA, blood glucose challenge, various things, we identify what your body nutritional requirements are and give you a tailored, customized nutrition solution for yourself and ultimately food fulfillment on the back end. So Habit is up and running. The test kits are available nationally if you want to go on habit.com and find out what your body needs uniquely from a nutritional standpoint. So that's some of the work that we're doing at the Campbell Soup Company, looking at the future of food and really focused on democratizing real food and making it available and accessible for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think just reflecting back from the first version of this conference, the first time it met 4 years ago, I think we had presenters from big companies and then we had entrepreneurs, and the two were starting to talk to each other. But one of the things I found interesting about Mark's presentation is now you have a multi-billion-dollar company also talking about their startups that are led by credible entrepreneurs. So that's a meaningful shift. But it's interesting, the closer you get to Silicon Valley, the more irrelevant policy feels. We're in the land of ignore it and just go on, break it, and they'll catch up with the laws. Food doesn't quite work that way. It's a highly regulated field. The future of food is good to be reminded about. Also, food can kill people. So that dimension of it, the notion of equity, an equitable food system is something that's really rising up. And our next guest is really an expert in this field. He's one of the foremost authorities in the realm of food policy. He's been actively working to shape food policy during the Obama administration. Before that, in the Clinton administration, he was very involved in the FDA and food safety. We just learned together talking that Jerry Mand is our next speaker, and he and I were actually on the phone together during the Odwalla juice crisis in 1996 when David Kessler was in charge of the FDA, and we were trying to figure out how to both protect our eaters and drinkers and also, effectively preserve the integrity of that company, which I have to say the FDA did a noble job of participating with an intention to do that. So it's really a great treat to have Jerry Mand here all the way from the East Coast, so let's give him a warm welcome.
So thank all of you. These meetings, I've had a chance to go to a couple of them in CIA, and the people this time, there's really a lot of fun. And so I want to begin by apologizing by how depressing some of my presentation will be, because, but I think when you see it, and you'll understand that it's hard to look at food without being aware of some of this. And so we've all seen the headlines. It's emerging every day. The situation's getting worse. And how many of you have seen these maps before? How many? So not very many. This is something for me that's a focus of my work all the time. These are a great set of maps that CDC has pulled together since the 1980s that shows the spread of the obesity epidemic in America. And so what you're seeing here as the colors change, you're seeing how in 1980, 85, 90, when this started, there was no epidemic. This problem was solved. But as the colors change and get darker, the spread of the obesity epidemic grows. And as you see here in this set of maps, it gets up to, you'll see in some of the southern states, it gets up to about 30%. So here you have the first map, one of the early maps there from 1990, and at that time, you can see that every state in the United States had less than 15% obese. And on the right is actually a slightly different set of maps, the maps since 2010. That GIF that I had before only went up to 2010, but these are the maps that cities continue to produce. They've come up with a new set of colors, which also reflects a slightly different methodology, but you can see that the problem continues to grow. So we're in the last map, you only went up to about 30%, now you're seeing over 35%, and you're seeing that from 1990 to today, in about 25 years, you went from not having a single state in America with 15% of its population obese to today where every state has more than 25. And that the national obesity rate that CDC just reported in the last couple of weeks is now 40% of Americans are obese. Really just startling situation. And so how did this happen? Looking at the data, people, you hear about a lot of things. You hear about, well, people sit in front of the TV, they do different things. But actually, when you look at the data, it's pretty clear what happened. And so you look at, well, what's really changed from 1980s, 1990s to today, and you see that people are eating more calories. And it works out to almost a meal's worth of calories a day. And sometimes I'm wondering, when some of our colleagues were thinking about, well, what happened, and maybe some of you know, maybe some of you were in the boardrooms when this occurred, but it almost seems like, you're sitting there and the pressures that you're all under, particularly from Wall Street, where you're trying to get double-digit growth all the time. We sort of envision this meeting where the CEO is there saying, I need this double-digit growth, and the mid-level managers sort of throw up their hands and say there's just no way to get it on 3 meals a day. And so what happened? Fourth meal. And that's exactly, if you look at the data, what's happened. There are 4 meals worth of calories that people consume each day. And as it says here, as part of the tagline, everyone is a fourth mealer. Some just don't know it yet, and it's true. Everyone in America, and again, fourth, the number of meals, it has to do with the calories in the meals. So essentially, the entire obesity epidemic is a result of most Americans eating a fourth meal a day. Not necessarily a choice, but just something that is a result that builds from the food environment. So why does this matter? Maybe it's great. People ate more calories. It's fun, something to do with their money. So why the nutrition crisis matter? And if there's one slide, one piece of information I want you to take back and worry about, it's this. So the challenge is that when you look at the health consequences, the health problems we face as a country today, and this is really is an existential threat as great as any threat we face to the security of our nation. So poor nutrition is the main cause of failing health in the U.S. and globally because of these diseases. But the challenge of that, what results from that, is each day in the U.S., the food system causes more than 1,000 deaths and $1 billion in preventable expenses. So we hear about rising healthcare expenses, debates about that. You know, this slide here, this chart, I think captures it in a way that none other really had. So what this chart and graph shows is it plots two sets of curves. One has to show where a household average income is in America. So those are the slightly flatter lines. The one on the top is 100% of average income. The grayer one on the bottom is 50% of average income. The sort of what we heard before, the logarithmic, the things that are rising really quickly are the healthcare costs. And so this top one here is the average family income in America. And if you look at the sharply rising one, the one that's rising a little bit more sharply, the gray one, is one that looks at your total health care premium, so what you and your employer pay for health care, and your out-of-pocket health care expenses. So, you know, in the last election, something I pay close attention to in the policy work that I've done, when you look at all of the qualitative exit interviews, it's just remarkable how many Americans, the thing that is most concerning in their lives is rising health care costs. And they're onto something, because as I said here, so this second curve running up is premium and out-of-pocket expense. They intersect there, and that's in 2030. That's less than 15 years to what people spend in America for just their health care premium and out-of-pocket health care expense would equal the average family income in America. Now, that can't happen. The economy would be destroyed before that happened. But as a policymaker, I know that you have maybe half the time to solve the problem. And so when you look at rising healthcare costs, and you look at, you know, the debate in Congress where they, you know, there's a reason why you can't come up to answers, because the solutions are so painful to get there. We have very little time to deal with it. So remember that one thing, if nothing else. And it's not spread equally across the country. Going back to the last set of maps, the map here you see on left is for white Americans, and you can see for black Americans on the right. You can see that in the vast majority of states, their obesity rate is over 35%. And in fact, the latest CDC survey, I think among black women, the obesity rate nationwide is 60%. So the challenge is that it's getting policymakers, including the leaders of the companies who are here, to understand that this came about as a result of a food environment. It is not about personal discipline. It's not about individual choices that are driving it. Essentially, this idea where you went from 3 meals a day to 4 meals a day, the kind of food environment we had, it was an enormous experiment, and you take people and you put them in that type of food environment with the amount of sugar, fat, and salt in the environment, and this is essentially what happens. And so if we can advance that one understanding that it is the food environment and solving the problem requires that change, then we have the ability to reverse the trend. And of course, companies have faced health crises in the past. So in addition to being with Will on that phone call, I was also in this room when I was working at FDA investigating the tobacco industry, when these 7 CEOs of tobacco companies were called before Congress to help explain the crisis we felt in healthcare then. And back at that time, a tobacco-related disease was the #1 health problem facing the country. And we were able to solve that problem, and diet-related disease has since replaced that. But these 7 executives, what they're seen doing here, does anyone remember what they were raising their hand and saying? They're under oath, and they were basically swearing that nicotine is not addictive and their products are not killing people. And their consequences, all of them, within a few years, they were all out of their job, as the public came to understand that, in their own words, in their own documents, we are then in the business of selling nicotine, an addictive drug. So in 1999, in April, in a great book Michael Moss wrote, he documented that the heads of some of America's largest food companies came together and looked at the obesity epidemic. Fascinating in that is in Kraft, Jeff Bible, who was not in the previous picture but was a top executive at Philip Morris and had moved on, and now with Kraft, had helped convene this meeting because he was just consumed with the thought that the food industry should not follow the same path that the tobacco industry did. They didn't listen to him. They decided to go ahead and continue to do what they're doing. And as Moss reports, having resolved to ignore the obesity, the CEOs went ahead and continued to use as much salt, sugar, fat as not more. So we're facing a monumental crisis in health in 2017. Companies have a chance to respond differently. And the great news is that many are. And here are 4 that I think are doing truly an outstanding job. You just heard Mark talking with Campbell, but Nestle, Unilever, PepsiCo, all of them, I think, have leaders who really are trying to make a big difference in terms of food. So now I'm going to pivot. In the last part of my talk, I'm going to talk about this. So something else I got to work on that was a lot of fun, and probably the thing I had the most fun working in federal government when I was at FDA. I'm actually the person, you're in the room, I'm here, the person who actually came up with the graphic design for the nutrition facts label, which was a fun thing. I studied nutrition. I was at FDA. The commissioner, David Kessler, who we'll mention, asked me if I could, take some part of the label and work on it. And of course, it's an agency full of nutrition experts. And I came back to him kind of frustrated. I said, "You have all the nutrition experts you need." But the funny thing is, I minored in art in college, and I know that a graphic designer can tell you exactly where their eye is going to look. So if we come up with an iconic graphic design for the label, we can actually make the label do the work that we're trying to do to change how people eat. And so all the nutrition experts need to tell me what is the most important thing on the label, and we can have the designers design a label so that's what people will do. And it's not so much what consumers will see and how they will act, but the main reader, who reads 100% of their labels? The food companies whose package it's going to go on, and so you're going to change their behavior as well. So when we designed that label, we were told, of course, this is early 1990s, that the most important thing we need to do is get people to eat less fat. So that's why total fat comes up first. That's why calories from fat was added there. The goal was what? Get fat out. Government, we got this all nailed here. We've done it. Fat's going to come out of products. And the thing is, you need to ask. I've learned this about policymaking. That one of the very first questions you have to ask yourself is, what is the unintended consequence of the policy you're putting in place? And it's not asked often enough. And so this label is the new Nutrition Facts label. Congratulate those companies here and others who've been putting it on their package, even though FDA has recently delayed it for a couple of years with going back to the early part of the presentation. We don't have that time, but nonetheless. So we did a lot of interesting things with this label. I helped out on it some. We emphasized calories. We emphasized make serving sizes either. Also, an extremely important thing looking at health now is we emphasize the amount of added sugars. But again, what is the unintended consequence? If you recognize those colors, those are non-nutritive sweeteners. And in talking to a lot of food designers, they tell me that what their clients are coming in saying we need to get added sugars out. The thing in the toolkit that there's there to replace them is non-nutritive sweeteners. I know FDA really well. They can tell you about the carcinogenic effect of non-nutritive sweeteners, but no one has any idea the neurocognitive effects on a mass scale in the United States today if all food companies started taking out added sugars and started replacing them with non-nutritive sweeteners. The impact on kids in particular of that kind of widespread change, they don't have an idea. The great news, FDA has the authority and reasonable certainty of no harm to prevent that from happening, but it needs to look at it. And historically, they've looked at whether things cause cancer, but not neurocognitive effects of these chemicals. Another interesting thing about the food label, when we designed it, the law told us we had to put it in the context of a daily diet. And so we came up with this concept of daily value, if you see that on the label. The reason it's there and the reason that the amount is tucked inside is we sat down. We actually started off with a lot of different pictures. We thought that pie charts, different things like that. And consumers love those. And the consumers, actually, in the consumer testing we did, frankly, they hated this label. But because they hated the percentages on it, it scared them. But the thing is that we didn't just do that part of the test. We also gave them tasks to do to see if they could pick out the healthier food. And we gave them lots of images to work with and things, they never got it right. They may be afraid of percentages, but they nailed it every time in terms of making the right choices. And also the key thing there was when you showed the amounts, they got it wrong again because the amounts are all on different scales. So in the end, we tucked the amounts inside. We put the percentages there. Folks see that label? Facts up front. I just sort of, this is something that the Grocery Manufacturers Association came up with as sort of a sense during the Obama administration to say that they're sort of forward-leaning. They're going to help consumers. Notice there that the thing they've chose to emphasize is the amounts, and they've kind of hidden the amount of a percent of which is actually the effective part of the label. So hopefully people won't make that much use of it. I know it's out there, but hopefully we'll come up with a way of replacing that. Of course, we also see this. These are all things companies put on their labels. We called it, it was what led to the original update with the Tower of Babel. It's only gotten worse, and that's unfortunate. This is one quick example. I'm at Tufts, so I'll say this about it. I don't know how many people saw the Smart Choices program. Tufts was actually in the lead on that. It was sort of another way that you can come up with a front of pack image. But here's a system called NewVal. So the Smart Choices disappeared. And the reason it did is because here you had this system that's blessed it and said this is the healthier food. Here's a system that measures foods in a sort of an independent way, NewVal. And you see on the left is the original Fruit Loops. You see it has a failing score in terms of nutrition health. You see the one on the right that has a little bit more fiber in it, slightly better score, still sort of a failing score. And that was a system like this was able to catch what the other system was not. So the big question that we all face is, how can companies design labels that sell food, make money, and provide a healthier food environment? And it's great to hear the comments yesterday because I think the answer is it's the food. And the dietary guidelines, which the government puts out every 5 years, has really become more food-focused. This icon that I got to work on with Rob Post, who's here, and others who do great credit for that, replace the pyramid, which is very hard to understand with this idea. And sort of some key messages that came in with it are half your plate's fruits and vegetables, drink water, enjoy your food, eat less. If we can get those messages on food labels, that would be the way to go. One way to do that, the one thing I tried to do in the Obama administration that I wasn't able, but most disappointing, is we could update the ingredient list label so it's a lot easier to read. The striking thing is we updated the nutrition facts label. It's there, but we don't have an easy way to read ingredients. Here's a front of pack scheme that does that, puts the top 3 ingredients on the front of pack instead of those numbers that we saw before. And again, these kinds of scoring systems that work on nutrition. It can be done through partnerships that are happening with Grocery Awards, a lot with handheld Revolution and phones. And with that, I'll stop and look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
I'm fascinated with this idea of a food environment, Jerry. I hadn't thought about that. I also connect it, though, to just the age of anxiety that we live in, and a lot of the science that points to people's underlying emotional, psychological, economic, insecurities and things that lead to people eating unconsciously. I don't know if we have a topic on that at this conference this year, but we should definitely connect sort of the food environment, the external, to the internal psychological environment, because they're certainly linked. Our last speaker in this session is named Greg Dollarhide. Greg's an innovator in the fast casual restaurant sector. He's been a founder and executive and is on the board at Zoe's Kitchen and also Veggie Grill. So he's done some really innovative things. And I'm going to challenge Greg also to talk to us about that 4th meal.
Good enough.
Okay, please welcome Greg.
Thank you. So you got the clicker. Good. Yeah, I've been in the restaurant business all my life since I was 15 years old. That's where I started and went broke when I was 24 and got religion, went back to school, Cornell business. And I ended up at TGI Fridays back in the 80s, which was a free-for-all. And from there to now, selling plant-based food. I want to pitch our tomorrow's section. We're going to be talking about plant-based food solely. So I'm going to keep my plant-based food commentary, which I have a lot of, for tomorrow's breakout. So hopefully we'll see you there. But basically, what's on our plate in 2040, 20 years from now, let's say, and we were asked to talk about what the future of food might look like. It's going to be interconnected. That point's been made. And the problem with going last with gentlemen like this is you're old news by the time you get up. You guys have heard this before. So I'll try to bounce over some of that part that's in my presentation and go with some more insights. But basically, I got it down to 4. It's really environment, obvious sustainability, everything goes with the environment, and we all know that ad nauseum at this point. But shared values is kind of interesting. Like, what are truly shared values, especially between developing and developed countries? It's not the same game, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. The third is technology. Again, today, in today's world, how much technology do we want to put in our food? Where do we stop? Flavor saver, that's the warm-up act for where we could take this in the future. Where do we want to stop? Do we know the unintended consequences of Roundup? How much is Roundup taking down people's gut biome, right? Leaky gut, everything else. There's a lot of research coming out on that whole world that we are going to be staggered by as time progresses, I believe. Fourth is culture. Here's a great picture of 2 young people on the streets of Beijing eating. What are they eating? They're eating insects. That's right. And it's funny about, talk about millennials, they're open-minded, they want to try new things, experiential. I've got my 22-year-old son, we're down in north of Tulum, and we're having breakfast. And we order breakfast, and my breakfast arrives. And he looks down at me, "Oh, what did you order?" And I said, "Well, no, I just had oatmeal and some crickets." And I reached down and picked up a cricket, and what do you think? He looked at me like, "Oh, Dad, you're horrible. How would you do that, right?" But, hey, it was really good. And crickets on oatmeal with a little bit of blueberries, fantastic. A little extra protein, and actually gives a nice crunch. So culturally, 80% of the world eats insects, but we don't. Well, why not? We don't intentionally eat insects. Societally, it's not what we do. But we actually are eating insects, so you know. But anyway, so these things are interplaying, and it's all taking place in this umbrella of resource availability. And really, in the developed world, what consumers want is going to take a back seat to what is right. I want this. Okay, well, we're going to go down to the rainforest, and we're going to rip it up and bring it to you. Palm oil is one of many examples. Right? How much we're going to destroy that ecosystem so that you can have something new to use for your own benefit in San Francisco. Okay? In the developing world, there's scarce resources. We have to help them leverage those scarce resources. So how do we help them leverage scarce resources? Well, let's pick Venezuela, for example. Political unrest. It was so bad that the military had to go get people by gunpoint and make them go out and farm. Well, yeah, that bad. So they can really get ugly in developing countries. And I think we have a kind of a responsibility in the developed countries to not just support large corporations in South America and go get these women who go from store to store selling Avon, wipe off the Avon, put in the 2-liter high fructose corn syrup drink, the high glycemic index snacks. They go door to door to sell those, subsidized by large corporations. And the people, all of a sudden, are fat and losing their teeth. I happen to think we have an obligation in developed countries. I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I think we have an obligation in developed countries to let the developed countries come at it a little differently than we did. And for example, is it our right for developed countries to overfish local supplies? 130 million people eat 80% of the world's tuna. So, well, if you're in Japan, that's fun. I like tuna. But if you're in Fiji or Maldives or Marshall Islands or whatever, and the wall of death comes through on the trawler, and gill nets everything in your universe, and all you're left with is small reef fish, because all the big fish have been taken. Okay? And they are able to stay in the water for 9 months at a time and freeze on board. You don't have a chance. That's happening more and more. These countries have no voice, no international voice. Okay? So now, again, my soapbox, but I feel pretty strongly about how we're going to import our attitudes around the world. I don't mean just like, us in this room, but the United States, Europe, and the like. And it also goes to, marine farming. Okay? This is great that we have salmon that we can marine farm. The problem is their DNA is mixing with wild salmon. I don't know how many of you heard about this, but when the DNA mixed with the wild salmon are not strong enough to get back up to the breeding grounds. They just lost that little bit of tweak that was in their chromosomes that gave them the strength to get back. Well, that's pretty interesting. Who'd have thought that would have happened? So, also, if you're in Europe and you know GMOs, well, okay, so the world should not use GMOs. Well, tell that to the Africans in sub-Saharan Africa who now can grow red wheat in a drought environment where they couldn't before. So GMOs look pretty good to them. So our value system is not their value system, and our culture is not their culture. And so I think as we all think about this whole area, this is going to come to the forefront more and more. And so what are the things that are going to be, we have to know. 70% of the food is going to be consumed at higher levels in developing countries. 47% from just population growth, and 30% is going to, because they're going to eat more, finally. Because it's been chronic hunger for a long time, and fresh water resources are going to get scarce. So how do we make that, how do we help them maximize that? And I look to, you look to the Campbell Soups of the world and say, okay, guys, work with everybody else, so let's figure out how we can do this. We can do it in our own country, use less resources, and then also help them eat really well and learn from our mistakes of high fructose corn syrup and high glycemic index snacks. So how will this drive what you see in the future? If now I'll put my restaurateur hat on, what are we going to see? Well, one thing we're going to see is we're going to see a lot more fungi. Okay? And fungi is really kind of fun. When you think about it, it's clean, sustainable. It increases crop productivity. You can put fungi down in the soil, and the uptake is dramatically better than if you use more phosphates and more fertilizers. By the way, there is a limit to how much phosphate we can use before it's gone. It converts, and we've got to keep digging it up. Whereas you can grow fungi, help things grow. Gut biome friendly, adds a lot of umami. So I think you're going to see a lot more on fungi, and you're going to see a lot more on algae. I think this is one of the most fascinating areas we have ahead of us is what to do with algae. And kelp is a form, and there's other kinds. But all the chefs here know alginates, and they've been using them for years. But now, how do we make algae a food source? I know groups that are taking algae and cooking it in beer facilities, and they're able to dial in how much protein or how much oil it produces. And they make like they make beer. Okay? Well, there's an endless supply of that food. Endless. There's endless supply of kelp. We have the whole ocean to grow food in, right? And it grows 2 feet a day. Let's get this right. So there's no water. No, it's already there. No nutrients. Already there. No effluent. Well, it decomposes or feeds fish. Come on, let's make this work. And there's this young woman. I urge you to go look at this woman. She crowdsourced a kelp jerky. It's called Beyond the Shoreline. I urge you to go to her website. She's got a 3-minute video. She's the cutest thing in the world with a great sense of purpose. Just a dear heart. I looked at her and said, we got to fund her. We got to find a way to support entrepreneurs like that have that kind of vision that's going to help this whole planet. And she raised, you know how much she raised? The whopping sum of $10,000. $10,000. And Mark's going, on the shoreline. How do we make that work? So I think you're going to see a lot more of this stuff. And so I just thought, that as a context of our food future, now me as a restaurateur, what I've done over my life is to synthesize people, money, and materials, bring it together, private equity ideas, concepts, and move it forward. Here's some of the things that have been talked about already. Delivery everywhere now is a no-brainer. It's already happening. It's going to happen some more. I remember 30-some-odd years ago, I was at the Awani Hotel in Yosemite, and my wife were sitting at the fireplace. And God, we don't want to leave. We're going to have dinner, and the dining room's full. We don't want to leave. I wonder if they'll do room service here. Sure enough, we got room service to the fireplace at the Awani Lodge. We had the best seat in the whole lodge. Right? Well, we had our room service kind of thing. Well, that's exactly what everybody wants to do at their home or at the beach. I mean, delivery at the beach? Sure, why not? Tower 7, Zuma. Bring it. Why not? I go down to that crummy hot dog stand. So that's coming, and I think it's coming in a big way. Sustainability, we've talked about. DNA purpose food. Bring your food stick. So you already brought it up, and the company's spending a lot of money on it. But what I want to do is I want to have a food stick. My food stick. And I've done all the testing. I know what my allergens are, what I should eat more, what I should eat less of. You should be more blueberries, stay away from the nightshade vegetables, got my food stick. And I walk into a restaurateur, and I go, okay. And up comes, these are the menu items that rank the highest for your food stick, from 92% to, really this stuff here, -4. Don't eat this, okay? And not just the usual fat grams and sugars and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about dial it in. And then the best chefs that have a fantastic mise en place. I mean, just 130 ingredients, like makes Chopped in New York look like it's a warm-up act. The big set of ingredients and AI-driven recipe. Oh, okay, so here's Greg Dollarhide. Oh, okay, no nightshade, extra this, allergy that, Okay, let's see, boom. Oh, okay, great, got it. Here's your dish up. Okay. And you do it in a way where you can give it to them, take it home. Why not cook it there, take it home, doesn't matter. This is coming. No doubt in my mind, this is coming. Okay? And I'd love to be an investor, so if anybody's doing this, please let me put some money in. Urban vertical farming. I met this young entrepreneur in LA who promised me he could deliver a perfect head of Boston lettuce for $1. When I was a veggie grill, I went, well, let's see. If I charge $10 for a salad, and I got a buck in that perfect, gorgeous. Oh, by the way, I can dial in the color. If I want it darker or more bitter, I can dial that in. If I want it lighter or more creamier, I can dial that in. I can dial it in by what kind of lights he uses and what kind of nutrients he puts in the water. And it's all organic. It's done in this container. All right, we need more of this. Happy, thank you, more, please. Give me a stack of these. And can you deliver them for $1? Now, he had problems with logistics and the like, but someone else is not going to. And in the future, vertical farming is, you come by, anybody been to Pompeii? Pompeii. Okay. Remember Pompeii where even on the oldest street, there's this big counter with holes in it? Everybody see that? It was the original fast food restaurant because they would fill it up full of stews, and the people would come by and get their stew filled up and go back to their house. Pompeii. Well, that's nothing new. Well, why not go by the vertical farming place and pick up your bag of greens or have it delivered? Yeah. Like someone was mentioning, I buy my spinach for the week. Tessa, I buy my spinach for the week. Oh, great. Yeah, spinach can buy every day because Uber's going to be driving by anyways. Drop it off. Another area that I am an investor in that I think is huge is supply chain waste. And I don't just mean ugly food. Ugly food's great. It gets you on TV and you can talk about it, and God bless them. The remnants that are left in the field are amazing in today's supply chain. One very large corporation in the United States loses about $30 billion a year in food waste, okay? And their net income is only $27 billion. So why don't they knock like $3 billion off that? Okay? Well, they're working on it. And what's coming with technology, the great thing about technology, you get you harvest your strawberries. Anybody know how fast a strawberry degrades? I found this fascinating. 1 day for every hour it's out of temp after you pick it. 1 day. And you get about 16 to 18 days. Well, so if you get old strawberries in the store, they've been bouncing around the supply chain for 14 days probably, right? Not anymore. You can have a little RID chip. Bam, the RID chip talks all the way through the supply chain. Now you're at a DC at Walmart, and you're saying, these strawberries, let's see, these have 10 days left on them, 9 days, 8 days. Okay, the 8-day ones are staying here in Atlanta, and these 10-day ones are going to Boston. That intelligence in technology is coming in the supply chain. And I know people that I'm invested in and people that are actually doing it inside of Walmart to try and save the money. So big data is going to really help this whole process. How can we bring big data to these developing countries and help them in the right way? Okay, manage water and what to plant, when to plant, that kind of stuff. It's all there. The last but not least thing I think is kind of fun with this industry is self-serve alcohol. I think it's just the most amazing trend in 5 years. What's going to happen? Self-serve alcohol, because you're going to just like how many people have been through Clear at the airports. You get about 10% penetration. Not quite there yet. It's amazing. Those of you who don't try it. It's like, put your 2 fingers down, and people walk you to TSA and through the other side. All done, okay? Well, I'm down with that. Give me the 2-finger thing, okay? So I'm going to pay with 2 fingers. I'm going to do everything with these 2 fingers. In fact, I'm just going to fly with 2 fingers. Hey, I got my fingers. I'm on the plane. And self-serve alcohol is going to be the same way. 2 fingers, okay, there you go. Pick any wine you want, restaurants. So that's all coming. I think that's actionable. You can make money at it. The food stick is actionable. Someone's going to make a ton of money at it. Ocean farming is actionable. I hope that young lady at Beyond the Shoreline figures out the kelp jerky. And that's how I see some of the future of food. There's a lot more. But thank you for your time.
You forgot cannabis. You're in Sonoma County.
Oh, right.
Just walk any direction and you can experience the... We have something here, come back in December 9th and 10th. It's called the Emerald Cup. It's the most amazing trade show on cannabis you've ever seen. So, you know what we're going to do? We're going to actually move on to the next panel. We're going to let you think about your questions. Our guests are going to be here during the break following that. We'd love for your suggestions about the word to replace consumer. I feel like we've begun a movement here. We're going to look back 10 years from now and say it all happened right here at Copia. And let's see. I'm going to introduce Hildreth England. Hildreth, are you here? I hear her coming. Hildreth, oh, you know, while Hildreth's getting her microphone on, I wanted to point out, you know, Jerry mentioned that his background was in nutrition and art, which I thought was fascinating. And Hildreth's, I love this. Hildreth, get this. This is called cross-disciplinary innovation. She's got a degree in diplomacy from Georgetown, a degree in nutrition from Texas State, and a degree in food innovation and design from Unimore in Reggio, Italy. So is that a beautiful combination of disciplines coming together? And she's an award-winning performer, director, and she has this really cool design studio called Hestia, which I happen to know means hearth. She was a goddess, right? A goddess of the hearth. The virgin goddess of the hearth, yes. So Hildreth is the assistant director of the Open Agriculture Initiative, working very closely with Caleb at MIT, and it's my pleasure to introduce her to introduce our next session. Thank you very much.
We're going to play the game of introducing to introduce some more. Hi, everybody. I've been running back and forth, but it's a pleasure to see all of your bright and shiny faces. We're going to rev up a little bit with a dynamic duo. We've got Mike Lee and Danielle Gould coming on stage, who are the co-founders of Alpha Food Labs. And just a little bit of background about each of them. So Mike he's the founder of Studio Industries and Future Market. Future Market is a futurist food lab. And then, like I mentioned, the co-founder of Alpha Food Labs. But before that, he was leading product development initiatives for Chobani, so from snout to tail for Chobani. And he's been raised in kitchens, essentially. So he's got a broad expertise, and he's teamed up with Danielle Gould, who is one of the most innovative women in food, named by Fortune and Food and Wine. And in addition to being a co-founder of Alpha Food Labs, if anybody hasn't subscribed yet to Food Tech Connect, please do. It's the site of record for the world's largest community for food tech and innovation. And she's also a founding member of the Culinary Institute of America's Menus of Change Sustainable Business Leadership Council. She's a member of the Google Innovation Lab for Food Experiences and a mentor for Excel Foods and FoodX. So they're badasses, basically, and they work together and they do great things. Let's welcome them to the stage.
Thank you for that generous introduction, Hildreth, and hello, everyone. So you might know us from our respective organizations, the Future Market, Studio Industry, and Food Tech Connect. We're going to tell you a little bit about our new company and some of the lessons that we've learned in looking at the future of food over the last couple of years and what it might mean for the food service industry. So our new company is called Alpha Food Labs. It's a platform for building and launching food products and companies that are democratizing healthy and sustainable food. So we do that in two ways. The first is for the past year, we've been working with large food companies on doing rapid product development. So identifying emerging consumer needs, and then working with companies to rapidly prototype new product ideas in the span of 11 to 14 weeks, and testing them out with consumers. And then next year, we're going to be launching a startup studio. So we will be taking the insights that we've gained and building our own concepts internally, validating them, and then the ones that rise to the top will be spinning out into standalone products. And we have a third co-founder who's sitting right up here, who you'll be hearing from tomorrow, Victor Friedberg, as well. So Alpha Food Labs is bringing together all of the work that we've been doing over the last decade. Food Tech Connect, as Hildreth said, we are the site of record in the world's largest community for food tech and innovation. We have a community of over 40,000 food innovators, from farmers to Fortune 500 executives in 32 countries around the world. And then we have the Future Market and Studio Industries, which Mike has built, which is the Future Market is a concept grocery store that's stocked with products from the future. And the reason that we do that is to envision what the future of food will look like over the next 5 to 25 years, what the products we hope will look like in that future, and then using that as a way to innovate more ambitiously today. So just as Mark was talking about earlier, the approach that Campbell has taken, we take a similar approach. If you understand what the future looks like, then you can think much differently about the decisions you make today. So started off with paper and pen, just some drawings and ideas, which Mike talked about last year if you saw his talk. And then this year, we actually launched the Future Market. So we've partnered with the Fancy Food Show. We have 2 installations every year at the Fancy Food Show, where we are able to bring you and walk you through this immersive experience into the future of retail, where you are also able to explore 23 concept products and have a personalized experience, which we're going to walk you through in a little bit. So basically, we're taking all of our experience at understanding the future and where the future of CPG and retail are going with our understanding of the network in our community. And we bring all those things together to explore and define and now build the future of food. So Mike's going to walk you through some of the findings that we've had.
So as Danielle said, we've built over 22 concept products in the Future Market, and we've taken a lot of the themes that you've seen so far here at reThink Food, and we've gone sort of a step further and said, what happens if you sort of mock these up and build concepts around them, similar to how the auto industry builds concept cars to illustrate their versions of the future? And can we, by doing that, sort of get people in the industry and consumers to understand a little bit better what the potential is for some of these early trends? And so all of these concept products are seriously rooted in just early stage things that we're seeing bubbling up today, whether it be a new trend, technology, behavior, what have you. And so we're going to share with you what we shared at the Fancy Food Show, and we're going to highlight a few of the concept products that really rose to the top in terms of people's feedback and how they got their heads around the future of food. Again, this is a shot of the 23 products. The full suite of products are up there on thefuturemarket.com. We're working on additional ones continuously, and there will be more at the next Fancy Food Show in San Francisco here in January. And one of the big themes that runs through all of what we're doing with these concept products is that this idea that food tribes are redefining CPG. You really heard this early on day one with Eve's talk about how kind of identity and food are really closely linked. But what's happening is this $1 billion opportunity of a lowest common denominator user doesn't really exist anymore. We've splintered into food tribes, and empowerment through digital media and a shared value system really means that this is where the action's at in the future. And if you're a CPG company that's not looking into one or more of these, you're sort of missing the boat, and you're going to have to play catch up for things like serious things like autoimmune cancer, IBS, and then things that are more kind of straightforward, like a paleo, CrossFit, or a yoga lifestyle. As a result, these food tribes have really been driving the new mainstream. And these are examples, 4 of many examples we could share about what the new mainstream in terms of CPG products are. The pace is relentless, though, and it's not stopping there. On top of some of those logos that we saw before, you're seeing the new emerging edge, and these are continuing to redefine what the market is looking for. But one of the biggest themes that we kind of see throughout all of these companies is a big idea around sustainability and health should be scalable. This used to be sort of a mutually exclusive idea, and I think what we're all trying to get at the future is trying to make those two things not mutually exclusive anymore. How do you scale sustainability? How do you scale health? How does it redefine what those words mean? Our process internally is something we call amplifying weak signals. So we take a weak signal, so say some way that somebody in the paleo community is eating a certain way, and we say, all right, that's maybe a small niche thing right now, but what happens when that becomes completely mainstream? What does that look like in terms of a product? What does that look like in terms of an experience? That's how we arrived at these 23 concept products. So there's a lot of themes that you may see that are, themes that you may know and may seem obvious. So food waste, I think, goes without saying. It's a huge issue. We've talked about it a lot. I can't say enough about how serious of an issue it is. And some of the concept products that we show and we design may not look that sci-fi or futuristic at all. They may look as simple as something like this, a concept product we call Trim Snack. Essentially, it's a mix of scraps of vegetables and meat, and it's dehydrated into a really convenient and easy-to-use kind of snack that takes care of food waste. So again, like we talk about the future of food is food, this is quite literally food. This isn't a soylent. This isn't a pill that you're just going to swallow and have be your nutrition. We're looking at how products like this could exist in the next year or the next 5 years, and you can see things like we call out 2 ounces of food waste in every bag. That kind of reflects the shift in the value system, whereas maybe you might see in a product like this call out protein or carbs or something like that. This is something that calls out values as a main key point of the product. We look at things around the meat industry, and if you're a butcher, or you know a butcher, or you think about the thing that go on in the meat industry. I gotta adjust my little Janet Jackson here. Wardrobe malfunction. Is that better? Okay, cool. So if you look, wow, that's so much better. Okay. If you look on a cow, there's this disproportionate amount of attention and love given to a certain amount of cuts, like things like ribeyes. We all celebrate them, we all want them, but a cow really only has a few of these, right? There's a lot of other pieces of the animal that don't get as much love and sort of are left by the wayside. So what if we kind of could shift demand a little bit and say, let's create this product called Holy Cow. Holy Cow is essentially a bento box product where instead of just isolating the ribeye, the part that you love, and then leaving everything by the wayside, could we create a bento box where you're getting a little bit of the entire cow? You're getting some ground, you're getting some of the roast stuff, you're getting some of the offal meat. So we sort of say that if you bought 100 of these things here, you'd essentially have the entire sum of all the meat that comes off of a cow with little to no waste. So again, not a sci-fi idea, but how can we shift the way we're creating products to shift demand and improve sustainability and improve waste? We know that things are personalized, right? We've seen tons of examples already. Day 2 is one of those examples of a company that's looking at your microbiome and trying to pair foods with that fit your specific microbiome. Mark shared Habit, which is a great example again of really great entrance into personalized nutrition. But again, can we go deeper into that and could we say, what if in the future we had something called Analyze Me, which is based off of a pill that already exists today where GI doctors can make you swallow this and they can study pH, pressure, it can have a video feed of the inside of your stomach. But could we create something called this Analyze Me where you could swallow this on a daily basis, have it sort of scan your microbiome and beam that data out to be used in the future? This is a little bit more out there, but if you had that data, could you create something like Custom Culture, which is a yogurt that's quite simply a microbiome customized yogurt? We are all individuals. Why are we buying one size fits all food? So that's sort of the idea that we played around with Custom Culture and Analyze Me. Healthier oceans. So this is another theme that doesn't get enough play in our opinion. But we think that one of the themes that comes up when you talk about oceans is this idea of invasivores. So lionfish in the Gulf Coast, it's a real problem. They kind of decimate a lot of commercially viable fish population, and having them in the ecosystem sort of throws things off of balance. So how could we create demand for this to say, is there a product out there that can also solve a problem that we have going on in the ecosystem? And when you think about lionfish or invasivore, it's not the most sexy thing to sort of market. It's sort of a scary thing. We flipped it around and we said, let's make kids fish sticks. Something fun like this. Aquacull is quite simply a killer fish stick that's based off of lionfish. And the idea here, I think it remarks to be seen, is that once you kind of cull out the appropriate amount of lionfish from the population, we'd switch the fish out for another fish, therefore keeping an ecosystem in balance, but doing it in a way with using kind of old school CPG tactics to create demand. Regenerative ag is a really big one, and I would argue that this whole idea around regenerative ag and crop rotations and keeping healthy soils around was really kind of one of the initial sparks of why we wanted to create the future market. Most of the country is growing agriculture in monocultures today. Same crop, same time, lots of pesticides, lots of fertilizers, denudes the soil. So we sort of know there's problems there. How can we create a mass CPG product that reinforces a polyculture instead? Instead of planting a monoculture and creating a series of products after that, how could we take things like Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, the original polyculture, a synergistic series of plants where these three plants help each other grow and they help keep the soil rich? And could we kind of grow this at scale and say, Three Sisters, it's a product made of dehydrated corn, beans, and squash, simple polenta product. There's nothing scary or bleeding edge about this, and that's almost the point, because we don't want to show what is for the 1% in the future. We want to show how can we shift the ecosystem in the farm with products that are made for the mass consumer. And that's really what the spirit of Three Sisters was. So again, the future of food CPG is all about scalable sustainability and health. But what about the retail environment? There's a lot of themes that we see in the retail environment as well, and it breaks down into a few categories. First off, we see the future of retail being really decentralized and convenient. We've seen a lot of examples of this today, how e-commerce and omni-channel are really changing the notion of what it means to be in a retail setting. But if you look at how retail has been framed before, it's sort of been designed around these monolithic temples where there's this huge mega store and you sort of have to abide by their hours and their locations and their aisles, and it's not really a flexible thing that kind of molds around how people actually want to live and shop. What you're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years, 5 to 25 years, that's already happening, is that the place where you order your food, the place where the food is picked and packed, and the place where the food arrives at you, gets to you, is all going to be sort of in 3 different places. It's going to be completely distributed and centralized, and I think it benefits the consumer because it folds around the way that you want to live, not the way the grocery store wants to operate. Experiential. We built a prototype with one of the largest produce distributors in the Northeast called Baldor, called Produce Pro. And essentially, it's going off this insight of saying that the average grocery store doesn't really have that dynamic of an experience inside of their produce counter. So what if we used an off-the-shelf technology, a two-way telepresence system that we built into this produce stand to say you can touch the screen and hold up a vegetable and instantly be connected with a chef, a butcher, or a farmer, a supplier, anybody that we decide to put on the other side of the video screen to kind of light up that experience again and make it more interactive. The grocerant is a trend that's reinforcing this idea around how we need to get more experiential in the future of retail. I mean, the stats really are staggering. Around $10 billion of consumer spending in 2015 were made around in-store dining and takeout prepared foods from grocers. We think this kind of speaks to the idea that grocerants are a way to create experiences within retail, because what's happening is all the stuff in the center aisle is soon going to be a click away without ever having to sit in the grocery store, and fresh is maybe the last holdout, but as Amazon starts to chip away at that, what's the reason for you to step into a real grocery store anymore? And so I think that retailers that want to thrive need to get in the feelings game, get back into the feelings game, and create reasons for people to be there. Productive. By and large, food is created here on the farm, and it probably forever will be, but we're starting to see things shift around where grocery stores are becoming the places of production as well, too. So no longer is the grocery store just a place of distribution, it's a place of production. And I think Gotham Greens is a great example of how you can make hyper local produce happen at scale. But you go a little bit deeper and you think about things like Cell Ag, which is not really nearly ready for prime time yet, but it begs the question that could this also be another thing that a grocery store could be productive on? Instead of kind of having to harvest meat in the traditional way, could Cell Ag sort of create these brewing vessels on site that makes hyper-local meat a reality as well, too? As an aside, we just launched a new concept as well, too, at a Cell Ag conference called Jiao Canting, which is loosely translated in Chinese for fake meat restaurant. It's essentially looking at a Chinese takeout restaurant collided with Cell Ag. So we took something really kind of very familiar and comfortable to people, which is Chinese takeout. I think everyone's done Chinese takeout. And collided it with something very scary to try to bring it down to earth. So this is a menu that you can check out online, but it shows that in a world of Cell Ag, what would the average Chinese restaurant look like? And finally, personalization. E-commerce obviously is a force to be reckoned with in retail, and you're already seeing things like you notice on Thrive Market. There's a way to shop by category, but there's also a way to shop by values. So I think this is sort of this interesting resorting of how people seek out products in grocery stores, is that value systems are kind of starting to come first instead of thinking about the traditional aisle arrangement. We kind of doubled down on this in the Future Market experience at the Fancy Food Show by making a digital experience where the first thing you actually did was you took a food ID questionnaire. We call it Food ID, but it's basically this concept around how could you build a data standard that encapsulates all of your preferences, all of your likes, your dislikes, and has it follow you around so that wherever you are, you can have kind of food catered to you. So we asked people 12 questions, and then we plotted them on this grid along 4 dimensions, whether you're a gourmet, healthy, sustainable, or value-oriented, or a mixture of some of all 4 of these, which most people are. And based off of that profile, what we did was we took our 22 products, we narrowed them down to 8 for you. So essentially what happened is we had a projection map shelving system where we narrowed down, you took the quiz, and then we showed the top 8 products for you, and you could explore from there. Of course, you could explore beyond that, but we wanted to try to solve the needle in a haystack problem and say, you're this kind of shopper, we think you're going to like this kind of stuff. And that was really what the experience was built around. So again, the future of CPG is changing. The future of retail is changing towards a more experiential, productive, personalized, decentralized, and convenient model.
So a lot of our research has been on the CPG and retail world, but we, as coming to this conference, we started to think about how can you take the trends that are happening in CPG and retail, and what does that mean? How are they going to influence the food service industry? Because food service has been much slower to innovate and to see a lot of the consumers and eaters driving change. So we think that there are a couple of key areas, and the first is around personalization. Today, we have customization, right? And you're seeing that by the growth of all the fast casual restaurants like Sweet Green, Tender Greens, where you can go and you can customize your food experience. So that's what our reality is today. We think that in the future, it's going to be a personalized experience. So imagine if you have your food ID, which Mike was talking about, which you could create at the Future Market, and when you went to a restaurant, you had a menu that was personalized for you. It would enable you to make better recommendations, better discovery, recommendations that are based on your personal profile, what your goals are, what your biometrics are, what your needs are. And because of that, once you have that personalized profile, you would be able to have personalized food. So for example, for me, I have a very limited diet. When I go to a restaurant, navigating all the things that I can't eat becomes a very cumbersome experience. What if someone could, through 3D printing or through being able to know beforehand what I can and cannot eat without me having to communicate that, what if they could produce food just in time that was personalized for me so that I could have just as great of an experience as everyone else at the table? And this is also really important because it will allow for more efficiencies in reducing waste. Imagine if you knew the kinds of people that were coming to your restaurant. You could do much better menu planning and ingredient sourcing. Now, this is going to be far in the future. We are far away for a number of reasons from being able to have these personalized profiles for people that they can share. But if you start to think about small ways that you can apply this to your business today, so going back to myself, for example, when I go to a restaurant, I have to have conversations with everybody about what my needs are. How could you improve that experience? If you're going to a hotel, how can I let you know ahead of time the kinds of foods that are important to me that I'd love to have stocked in my hotel room? Small things like that, where can you start to think about personalizing the experience? Because people are getting that in other places. It may be a little bit more difficult in the food service industry, but just thinking about where you can start to incorporate that. We, in the CPG industry, we've seen this huge wave of eaters driving companies to think more ambitiously and better about their sourcing and reducing their waste, right? And whether it's reducing waste or it's regenerative agriculture or supporting healthier oceans, thinking about how your consumers now care about that, and you don't see a huge amount of presence except for in a couple of fast casual restaurants and high-end restaurants. And so we wanted to look at, we get most interested in examples of how you see things that are happening by dining trickling down and becoming more mainstream. So this is an example of Dan Barber's Wasted. So the Blue Hill team, they shut down the restaurant for a month and launched a pop-up restaurant called Wasted, which featured all menu items that were using wasted ingredients that would have otherwise gone to waste. They then partnered with Shake Shack in order to launch a wasted burger, and with Sweetgreen to launch a wasted salad. And so thinking about how you can get creative, and it doesn't need to be your entire menu, but how do you get out there and start thinking creatively about how you can do one thing that's better for the planet? How can you, and as a great way to reach your eaters. Now, probably one of the areas that's getting the majority of the of press right now, definitely every other week we have an article that's popping up that says the robots are coming for your jobs, the robot, automation, there's going to be no one working in restaurants. So definitely there are a lot of companies that are working on automation. You have Roosterbot, which is trying to become the franchise of the future. It is literally in a fried chicken franchise in a box. And you have Sally, the robot, that can do your salads for a lot more efficiently and for a lot less cost than going to a Sweetgreen. But at the same time, you're getting pushback. There's this tension where there are luminaries from the food service industry that are saying that they are raising the bar for how their talent is paid and valued. And Danny Meyer is case in point, just launched a $220 million fund in order to invest in employee-centric companies, right? And so you're going to start to see this tension. And when we think about that, we think about the eater that has completely changed the CPG industry, right? With over the last 5 years, the top 25 food companies have lost $18 billion in market share. That's that consumer cares about what's in their food, how it's made, and how the people that are making it are treated, and that is going to translate to food. It is not going to be so easy to get people out of restaurants because people don't want that. There are going to be some instances, in some fast food instances, where automation is going to work, but for the majority of restaurants, people are still going to be a core, and we think that eaters are going to value the employees even more. And last, better, smarter convenience. So we've talked a lot about convenience, and there are a lot of companies that are looking at convenience and how to invest in it in a much smarter way, which enables for much more healthy and sustainable products. So Every Table is a company that we love. They have a variable pricing model, so depending upon which zip code you're located in. So if you are located in Compton, you may pay $4 for a salad. If you're located in Santa Monica, you may pay $12 for that salad. And what they're doing is they're innovating on the business model, right? And they're looking at, okay, we think that this good food should be accessible, and we are going to look at variable pricing as a way in order to accomplish that, which is very different than, let's say, how McDonald's went about bringing healthy food to the masses. Another area of innovation is really thinking about how do you de-risk launching concepts. So Think Food Group, Jose Andres' restaurant group, launched Think Food Lab. They had a lot of success with their beefsteak concept and decided that they wanted to launch more fast casual concepts. In order to do that in a de-risked way, they had this lab where they will test concepts out for a couple of months. They'll see how it resonates, and then they'll spin them out into their own standalone businesses if it works. And I think finally, and where we're starting to see this convergence of the CPG world and and food service is Amy's. So Amy's launched their drive-through this year, and it's the first time it's this brand that has been built and grown upon the backs of the eaters that really care about all of these new values. And now they're taking that power and they're extending it into food service. And so these are going to be the kinds of companies that are going to reshape the next phase of this industry, and so we're excited about that. So to end, the days of any company being able to create any food concept that they want and then drive market share through marketing is over. We have, as Eve talked about yesterday, we have eaters that are splintering into tribes. They are digitally connected and influenced by way different people, by online presence. They are very values-driven, and they're shopping with their dollars. And so the brands and the food service operators that win out in the future are going to be able to identify the signals that, like Mike was talking about earlier, and create products and services that meet those needs. Thank you.
You guys, it's coffee time. Wait, before you go, we're going to be back here at 3:45. You'll noticing, like, we started big and we're getting narrow. We were at CPGs and retail. We're going to talk food environments and dining experiences when we come back. So enjoy your networking, enjoy your coffee. We'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Hey, on your way out, you'll notice there's a donation station for fire relief. It's been moved to the hospitality desk.